The champagne cork popped with a celebratory explosion that echoed through the marble-floored penthouse overlooking Manhattan's Central Park. Sonia Williams stood in the center of their living room, her rich mahogany skin glowing under the crystal chandelier as she clutched her phone with manicured nails painted the color of victory, a deep blood red. Her natural hair, usually worn in elegant twists, had been freshly styled into sleek waves that cascaded past her shoulders, framing high cheekbones and eyes that sparkled with an ambition Kelvin had once found captivating. Now at 34 years old, dressed in a crisp white Alexander McQueen pantsuit that hugged her athletic frame, Sonia looked every inch the self-made CEO of Lumiere Cosmetics, the beauty brand she'd built from her Harlem apartment kitchen 7 years ago into a multi-million-dollar empire. $33 million, Kelvin, Sonia announced, her voice cutting through the space between them like a blade wrapped in silk. She turned to face her husband, who stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows, his tall, lean figure silhouetted against the New York skyline. Sterling Ventures just signed the distribution deal. $33 million over 3 years. Do you understand what this means? Kelvin Williams, 42 years old with the refined features and subtle British accent that betrayed his London upbringing, despite 20 years in America, adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and smiled cautiously. His light brown hair, graying slightly at the temples, was still damp from his morning shower. He wore his usual weekend attire, expensive but understated, a cashmere sweater and tailored slacks that spoke of old money rather than new flash. It's extraordinary, darling. Congratulations. All your hard work. My hard work, Sonia interrupted, setting down her phone on the Italian marble counter with a sharp click. Exactly. My vision, my formulas, my brand. She poured herself a glass of champagne, the bubbles rising like her evident excitement. But something in her posture had shifted, her shoulders squared, her chin lifted. I've been thinking, Kelvin, really thinking about what comes next. Kelvin moved closer, reaching for her hand, but Sonia stepped back slightly, creating a physical distance that mirrored something deeper. What do you mean? He asked, though a cold sensation was already forming in his chest. This deal changes everything, Sonia continued, her hazel eyes meeting his with an unflinching directness he'd never seen before. I'm playing in a different league now. Sterling Ventures is connecting me with distribution channels in 40 countries. I'll be doing international press, meetings with investors in London, Paris, Dubai. And honestly, Kelvin, I need to think about optics. The word hung in the air between them like smoke. Optics. I don't understand, Kelvin said carefully, though he was beginning to. Sonia took a long sip of champagne before continuing, her words measured but devastating. You're a good man, Kelvin. You've been supportive. But let's be honest about what you are. A middle manager at a venture capital firm. You make what, $200,000 a year? In this penthouse that I bought? Driving the Tesla that I lease? Living off the success of my brand? Kelvin felt the blood drain from his face. Sonia, we're married. Your success is our success. I've supported your business from day one. With what? Sonia's voice rose slightly, revealing an edge that had been sharpened in private over weeks or perhaps months. You gave me $10,000 6 years ago when I needed equipment. I've repaid that 100 times over just in letting you live this lifestyle. But now I'm moving into rooms where people will ask questions. Who's your husband? What does he do? And when I say you're a mid-level analyst at Pinnacle Capital, I can see them calculating, wondering if I'm supporting you, if you're slowing me down. This is insane, Kelvin said quietly, his British reserve cracking just slightly. We've been married for 9 years. We built a life together. You built a comfortable existence riding my coattails, Sonia shot back, and I let you because I thought I needed the stability, the legitimacy of being married. But that was the old Sonia. The new Sonia, the one with a $33 million deal, doesn't need a mediocre husband holding her back. The cruelty of the words landed like physical blows. Kelvin stood very still, processing the transformation of the woman he'd married, the woman who'd cried in his arms when the first shipment of her products had sold out, the woman who'd said she couldn't have done it without him. That woman had apparently died somewhere between the morning's contract signing and this afternoon's champagne. I want you out, Sonia said flatly. I've already spoken to my attorney. New York is a no-fault divorce state. We'll split whatever assets existed before the business took off. So basically nothing that matters. You can take your clothes, your books, whatever personal items are actually yours. But this penthouse, the cars, the vacation home in the Hamptons, that's all mine, built with my money from my company. Kelvin's hands trembled slightly as he removed his glasses to clean them, a nervous habit from childhood. When? He managed to ask. Today. Now. I have a celebration dinner with my executive team tonight, and I don't want to come home to this energy. Sonia's expression remained hard, businesslike, as if she were terminating an underperforming employee rather than ending a marriage. There's a Marriott 3 blocks away. My assistant already booked you a room for 2 weeks. That should give you time to find an apartment that fits your actual budget. The dismissal was complete, clinical. Kelvin looked around the penthouse that had been home for 5 years, seeing it suddenly through Sonia's eyes, not as their shared space, but as her trophy, her proof of success, tainted by his modest presence. I'll pack a bag, he said quietly, turning toward the bedroom. Make it quick, Sonia called after him, already scrolling through her phone. I have calls to make. International press doesn't wait. 3 days later, Kelvin sat in the minimalist hotel room that smelled of industrial cleaning products and other people's disappointments. His modest suitcase lay open on the luggage rack, containing enough clothes for 2 weeks of exile. The room's single window overlooked a brick wall, a stark contrast to the penthouse's panoramic views. He'd barely eaten, surviving on room service coffee and the minibar's overpriced nuts, trying to process the sudden demolition of his life. His phone buzzed with a message from his younger brother Marcus in London. Mum says you're not answering her calls. What's going on? Kelvin ignored it. How could he explain to his aristocratic British family that his wife had discarded him like outdated inventory? The shame of it consumed him almost as much as the heartbreak. Another buzz, this one from his assistant at Pinnacle Capital. Kelvin, Mr. Ashford wants to see you first thing Monday. Says it's urgent regarding the Sterling Ventures file. Sterling Ventures, the name that had destroyed his marriage. Kelvin stared at the message, and something cold and calculating began to crystallize in his mind. He opened his laptop and pulled up the secure files from Pinnacle Capital, files he hadn't examined closely because they seemed routine, handled by other partners in the firm. Sterling Ventures, a subsidiary of Ashford Global Holdings. Ashford Global Holdings, the investment conglomerate founded by his father-in-law, Richard Ashford, before Kelvin had even met Sonia. The company where Kelvin worked wasn't just any venture capital firm. It was the American arm of his family's empire, a detail he'd downplayed for years because Sonia had always been sensitive about accusations of privilege, insisting she'd built everything herself. Kelvin's fingers flew across the keyboard, accessing files with his senior partner credentials. Credentials that reflected his actual position, not the mid-level analyst description Sonia had contemptuously thrown at him. He was vice president of strategic acquisitions, a title he'd kept modest because Sonia preferred being the star. The Ashford name, his mother's maiden name, appeared on documents throughout the Sterling Ventures deal. And there, buried in the final contract signatures, was the authorization line. Approved by Kelvin R. Ashford Williams, VP Strategic Acquisitions, Pinnacle Capital on behalf of Ashford Global Holdings. Kelvin sat back, his reflection visible in the laptop screen, a ghost of a smile forming on his lips. The $33 million deal that Sonia had celebrated, the deal she'd used as justification to destroy their marriage, had required his signature, his approval, his family's money. He'd signed it 2 weeks ago, never imagining his wife would use it as a weapon against him. Never imagining she saw him as disposable. The initial despair that had paralyzed him for 3 days began to transform into something else entirely. Not rage exactly, something colder, more calculated, a strategic advantage born from intimate knowledge and unexpected leverage. Kelvin picked up his phone and dialed a number he rarely used. Uncle Richard. Yes, it's Kelvin. I need to discuss the Lumiere Cosmetics distribution agreement. Specifically, I need to understand the full scope of Ashford Global's position in Sterling Ventures. No, everything's fine. Just due diligence. Yes, I'll come to the office Monday morning. Thank you. He ended the call and opened a new document on his laptop, titling it simply Restructuring Plan. Monday morning arrived with December's bitter cold settling over Manhattan. Kelvin dressed carefully in a Savile Row suit he'd had made in London. Not the casual weekend wear Sonia had last seen him in, but the armor of a man born into old money, educated at Oxford, and groomed for executive leadership. He looked at himself in the hotel mirror and saw not the dismissed husband, but the strategic investor he'd always been, hiding in plain sight. The Pinnacle Capital offices occupied 3 floors of a Madison Avenue skyscraper. Kelvin's corner office, which he realized he'd rarely mentioned to Sonia, overlooked Bryant Park. His assistant Jennifer, a sharp Columbia MBA graduate, greeted him with visible relief. "Mr. Williams, thank God. Mr. Ashford has been trying to reach you all weekend. There's some confusion about the Lumiere account." "No confusion," Kelvin said calmly, setting his briefcase down. "Just a reassessment of strategic priorities. Is the conference room prepared for 9 o'clock? "Yes, sir. The Sterling Ventures team is assembling now. Should I notify Mrs. Williams that—" "Ms. Roberts," Kelvin corrected, using Sonia's maiden name deliberately. "We're separated. And yes, please inform her that her presence is required for a contract review meeting. Tell her it's standard protocol for deals of this magnitude." Jennifer's eyes widened slightly, but she was too professional to comment. "Right away, Mr. Williams." Kelvin spent the next hour reviewing documents his uncle had sent over the weekend. The full picture was even better than he'd hoped. Ashford Global didn't just have partial stake in Sterling Ventures. They were the majority shareholder, controlling 62%. The $33 million distribution deal with Lumiere Cosmetics included performance clauses, approval rights on major business decisions, and most importantly, a clause that gave the investor the right to assume operational control if certain metrics weren't met, or if material misrepresentations were discovered in the initial business assessment. At 8:55 a.m., Kelvin walked into the large conference room. The Sterling Ventures team was already seated, 4 executives in expensive suits, laptops open, coffee steaming in china cups. And at the far end of the table, looking confused and slightly annoyed, sat Sonia. She'd dressed to impress in a burgundy power suit, her hair pulled back in a severe bun that emphasized her striking features. But when Kelvin entered through the main door, rather than as a guest from the side entrance, when he took the head of the table rather than a subordinate seat, confusion flickered across her face. "Kelvin, what are you doing here? They said there was a contract review." "There is," Kelvin said smoothly, opening his folder and distributing documents around the table. "Good morning, everyone. For those who don't know, I'm Kelvin Ashford Williams, Vice President of Strategic Acquisitions for Pinnacle Capital, representing our parent company, Ashford Global Holdings." He let that sink in for a moment before continuing. "Ashford Global is the majority stakeholder in Sterling Ventures, which means I have final approval authority on all major distribution agreements, including the recently signed contract with Lumiere Cosmetics." Sonia's face had gone completely still, her eyes locked on Kelvin as if seeing him for the first time. "Ashford Global? You never said— You told me you worked for—" "Pinnacle Capital, yes, which is the American operating division of Ashford Global. My family's investment firm." Kelvin's voice remained professionally neutral, but his eyes held hers with quiet intensity. "I kept the connection low-key because you were always so adamant about building everything yourself, without help or perceived privilege. I respected that. I signed off on your deal 2 weeks ago because the business metrics were sound and I believed in your product." "Believed?" Sonia caught the past tense immediately. "Believed," Kelvin confirmed. He opened his laptop and projected a spreadsheet onto the conference room screen. "However, over the weekend, I conducted a more thorough review of Lumiere Cosmetics' financial representations, specifically the valuations and growth projections that justified the $33 million deal." One of the Sterling Ventures executives, a stern woman named Patricia Chen, leaned forward. "What did you find?" "Discrepancies," Kelvin said calmly. "Significant ones. The quarterly revenue figures provided to Sterling Ventures included projected sales from contracts that haven't been finalized. The patent claims on 3 key formulas are currently being disputed by a former lab partner who alleges collaboration rights. And most troublingly, the company's debt structure wasn't fully disclosed. There are outstanding loans from private investors totaling nearly $4 million, secured against the company's intellectual property. Sonia's face had gone from confused to pale. Those are, those are minor accounting variations. Every business has material misrepresentations, Kelvin interrupted, his voice still measured, but with steel underneath. Section 12.4 of the distribution agreement specifically states that any material misrepresentations discovered within the first 90 days of contract signing give the investing party the right to either terminate the agreement or assume operational control to protect the investment. The room went completely silent except for the quiet hum of the HVAC system. Patricia Chen was reading through her own copy of the contract, her expression growing darker. "This is insane," Sonia said, her voice rising. "You're my husband. You can't just—" "Ex-husband, according to the divorce papers I received via courier on Saturday," Kelvin corrected. "And I'm not doing anything except protecting Ashford Global's significant investment in what now appears to be a financially unstable company with serious governance issues." Sonia stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "You're doing this because I kicked you out. This is revenge." "This is business," Kelvin replied, his British accent becoming more pronounced with the formal tone. "The same business you prioritize over a 9-year marriage? The same business you claimed was entirely yours, built without anyone's help. I'm simply ensuring that business is run properly, with accurate financial reporting and honest representation to investors." Patricia Chen closed her laptop decisively. "Mr. Williams, what are you proposing?" "Operational takeover, effective immediately," Kelvin said, distributing another set of documents. "Ashford Global, through Sterling Ventures, will assume majority control of Lumiere Cosmetics Board of Directors. Ms. Roberts will remain as Chief Creative Officer, overseeing product development, but all financial, operational, and strategic decisions will require board approval. We'll install a new CFO, bring in an independent auditor, and restructure the debt obligations before proceeding with the distribution rollout." "You can't do this," Sonia whispered, but there was no force behind the words. She was reading the contract clause, seeing the same language Kelvin had weaponized. "I can, and I am," Kelvin said. He looked at her directly for the first time since the meeting began, his expression unreadable. "You wanted to play in a different league, Sonia. Welcome to it. In this league, contracts matter, accuracy matters, and the people you dismiss as mediocre might turn out to control your entire future." The next 72 hours were a whirlwind of legal maneuvering and corporate restructuring. Sonia's attorney called Kelvin's phone 17 times, each message more desperate than the last. She tried anger first, accusations of vindictive manipulation and abuse of power. Then bargaining, offers to make things right, to correct the financial discrepancies, to give him whatever settlement he wanted in the divorce if he'd just walk away from the business. Kelvin didn't answer. He let his corporate attorney handle all communications while he worked with the Ashford Global team to execute the takeover. They installed Marcus Chen, Patricia's brother and a turnaround specialist, as interim CEO. They brought in forensic accountants who discovered even more problematic financial arrangements Sonia had made. Personal expenses run through business accounts, undisclosed payments to a marketing consultant who turned out to be a boyfriend Sonia had been seeing for 6 months. Each discovery validated Kelvin's decision. Each revelation made it clearer that Sonia's success had been built on a foundation of creative accounting and unsustainable practices that would have collapsed within a year, taking Ashford Global's investment with it. By Thursday evening, Kelvin sat in his newly reclaimed corner office. He'd moved out of the hotel into a luxury apartment in Tribeca that he actually owned personally, purchased years ago as an investment property, when his phone finally rang with a number he recognized, Sonia's personal cell. He let it ring 4 times before answering. "Yes?" "Kelvin." Sonia's voice was raw, stripped of its earlier confidence. "Please, can we meet? Can we talk about this like adults?" "I thought we did talk about it like adults," Kelvin said calmly. signing off on a report from the forensic team. You told me I was mediocre, holding you back, living off your success. You told me to pack my things and get out. You served divorce papers. I'm simply conducting business according to the contracts you sign. I made a mistake. The words came out in a rush. I was drunk on success, on the validation. I said terrible things, but we can fix this. We can work through it. You can have half the business, half of everything. Just please don't take Lumiere away from me. It's all I have. Kelvin closed his eyes briefly, hearing the genuine desperation in her voice. A part of him, the part that had loved her for 9 years, felt the pull of sympathy. But then he remembered standing in that penthouse being dismissed as disposable, being measured and found wanting by the woman who'd promised to love him for better or worse. You said it yourself, Sonia. In this league, optics matter. And right now, the optics are that you're a founder who misrepresented her company's financial status to secure a major deal. You're facing potential fraud investigations from the SEC. You're going to lose your business one way or another. He paused, letting that reality sink in. My way, you get to stay involved creatively. You get to keep the title of founder. You might even rebuild your reputation if you cooperate with the restructuring. The other way, you lose everything in litigation and possibly face criminal charges. How can you be so cold? Sonia whispered. Where's the man I married? He checked out of the Marriott on Monday, Kelvin replied. The same day you probably bragged to your executive team about dumping the deadweight husband. That man is gone, Sonia. What's left is a vice president of strategic acquisitions doing his job. He ended the call before she could respond. By mid-December 2025, the transformation of Lumiere Cosmetics was well underway. Marcus Chen had proven to be exactly what the company needed: ruthlessly efficient at cutting costs, religiously honest about financial reporting, and surprisingly creative about international expansion strategies. Under Ashford Global's oversight, they'd restructured the debt, negotiated better manufacturing contracts, and actually accelerated the international distribution timeline because the company's finances were now transparent and trustworthy. Kelvin attended a board meeting where Marcus presented third-quarter projections that exceeded the original $33 million deal by 18%. Sonia sat at the opposite end of the table in her diminished role, contributing product insights but saying nothing about strategy or finance. After the meeting, as everyone filed out, Sonia lingered. "Can I have a moment?" she asked quietly. Kelvin gestured to a chair. They sat across from each other in the empty conference room, two people who'd once shared everything, now separated by mahogany and legal agreements. "I've been in therapy," Sonia said, "trying to understand how I became that person, the one who said those things to you." Kelvin waited, saying nothing. "My therapist says I confused my self-worth with my business success, that I was terrified of being seen as anything less than completely self-made. So when the big deal came through, I had to eliminate anything that complicated that narrative, including you." Sonia's eyes were red-rimmed but dry. It was textbook narcissism, apparently. Fueled by imposter syndrome and a desperate need to prove I belonged in rooms with people who inherited their wealth. "People like me," Kelvin said softly. "People like you," Sonia confirmed. "I resented you for having what I had to scratch and fight for, and I punished you for the privilege I imagined made everything easier for you." She laughed bitterly. "The irony is, you were never in my way. You were the only person who actually believed in me before I had anything to prove." Kelvin removed his glasses, cleaning them with his pocket square. That old nervous habit. "I've been in therapy too," he admitted, "working through why I hid who I was, why I made myself smaller to make you feel bigger. That wasn't healthy either. I enabled your worst instincts by never setting boundaries, never demanding to be seen for who I actually am." They sat in silence for a long moment, two intelligent people finally seeing each other clearly. "Is there any chance?" Sonia began, then stopped. "No, never mind. That's not fair to ask." "No," Kelvin agreed. "There isn't. Not for us as a couple, but maybe eventually as business colleagues who respect each other's contributions." Sonia nodded, accepting the boundary. "For what it's worth, you're building something remarkable here. The new strategy, the international partnerships, the transparency initiatives. Lumiere is going to be twice what I could have made it." We're building it, Kelvin corrected gently. Your formulas are still the foundation. Your creative vision is still what makes the brand special. The difference is now it's supported by sound business practices and honest accounting. As Sonia left the conference room, Kelvin remained seated, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. The revenge he'd orchestrated had been complete. He'd taken control of the business his ex-wife valued more than their marriage, exposed her financial mismanagement, and reduced her role to a figurehead position. But sitting there in the empty room, Kelvin realized the revenge wasn't what satisfied him. What satisfied him was the vision taking shape. Lumiere Cosmetics as a genuinely successful global brand, built on transparent practices and real value. He was creating something that would outlast his anger, something that transformed personal betrayal into professional excellence. His phone buzzed with a message from his mother in London. Your father would be proud of how you're handling the Lumiere situation. Grace under pressure is the Ashford way. Kelvin smiled, tucking the phone away. The man Sonia had dismissed as mediocre was gone. True, but what had emerged wasn't defined by revenge or vindication. It was defined by the quiet competence of someone who'd always known his worth, had simply been waiting for the right moment to reveal it. By the time Lumiere Cosmetics officially launched in 40 countries the following March, with record-breaking sales and glowing press coverage, Sonia would attend the celebration gala as Chief Creative Officer. Kelvin would deliver the keynote address as Chairman of the Board. And between them would exist not the wreckage of a marriage, but the foundation of a business empire built from ashes, transformed by the very betrayal that had tried to destroy it. The lesson wasn't about revenge, Kelvin would reflect in interviews later. It was about knowing your value even when others can't see it, about maintaining integrity when systems collapse, about turning devastation into opportunity through competence, strategy, and the patience to let others underestimate you until the perfect moment to reveal what you've always been. The woman who'd thrown him out had taken everything he thought mattered. The man who walked back in had shown her and himself what actually did. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.